I get paid to catfish people on Omegle. I'm not gonna just sit here and lie about the fact that I think my job is meaningful. It's not. Omegle is a website that pairs random visitors through video and text chat, and it has spiked in popularity over the past 4 months. So, of course, con artists are gonna roll in and take advantage. Visitors can submit keywords to filter for people with shared interests, all of which I use to my advantage to find my next big fish to fry. Let me reiterate that I'm not an undercover officer nailing bad guys, just a regular Joe tricking gullible guys to send money to anonymous checking accounts that can't be traced. The company I work for gives me a new identity every week, a new model I use as a profile picture, and even write up a fancy description that is meant to entice unsuspecting clientele. All I do is pretend to be someone I'm not. I string them along with emotionally charged messages or innuendo, sometimes even send a few extra pics that are photoshopped for emphasis, whatever floats the boat. And once they are finally in too deep, I snag their credit card information and voila. Suddenly, the sexy, sultry woman they were talking to disappears entirely. Another sucker born. This works both ways too, not just on men, but I will admit they are usually the ones who get lured in the most. I suppose that I never considered it dangerous or the harm I might be doing to the families out there. After all, if they were loyal to their mates, they wouldn't be searching in the first place, right? And I never forced anyone to do anything. It was simply the art of persuasion. That's what I told myself anyway. But after what happened last week, I'm seriously considering getting a different line of work. "You're the one for me, Regina," the user typed out, and then sent a picture of an engagement ring to my DMs. The guy was a high-paying user. The bosses had designed a foolproof diva for him, named Regina, that checked off all the boxes he was looking for. He was going to be a big fish that fried when we were done with him. He had come so far into the chat, taking the extra step to provide legit certifying info that told me where he was located and stuff like that. He wanted to commit to a person, me, that he had never seen before. Naturally, I declined the ring, but instead asked for credit card information, like I have always been instructed. "Maybe we could meet up and have a real fling," I suggested. "You don't understand. You are my whole life. I devote everything to you. I worship you." It didn't make sense to me for anyone to have this sort of obsession over someone that they had never met before. But this guy was serious and apparently wanted more, and didn't want to hear me say no. That was definitely an unorthodox response, but I didn't let it deter me to be persistent and get what I needed. "Honey, I would love to spend more time with you, but you know that I can't unless I can get out of the situation I'm in," I cooed him. "No, I'm going to be with you. I don't care if we have never met, you are the one for me. I can prove it," he responded. Then a snapshot appeared on screen and I froze. It looked like an exact replica of the model I was pretending to be. This dude had literally carved out a wooden sculpture in my image. "That's so sweet," I typed back. Honestly, at this point, I was just trying to find a way out of the chat. To be honest, this creeped the hell out of me. I have just dealt with stalkers before, but this was next level. So I messaged the company and asked what I should do while I told him on. "Keep him strung along, don't give up. That shrine he built shows he is hooked," they said. My would-be suitor was growing impatient. "Regina, I'm beginning to think that you don't appreciate the things I do for you," he said sourly. "This sculpture isn't just a work of art, it's connection between us. I can feel everything you feel," he said as he touched the wooden idol, and I felt the hair on my arm stand up. Was he serious? I panicked and decided to disconnect, unconcerned with the money. My bosses were not too happy with that response. I'm supposed to stick the landing, so to speak. So they gave me some time off to rethink my career, and I just tried to take it easy and not stress. I kept telling myself I would never see that weirdo again, convincing myself it was all just going to go away. It was the only way that I could go back to work the following Monday. Things went back to normal for a while. I kept scamming would-be Romeos left and right, and getting back into the swing of things, ignoring that one creep and just doing my job. I was sure I would never experience something that nightmarish again, but I was wrong. About a month later, I entered the chat with my usual greeting, and the user immediately sent the query, "Is this Regina?" For a brief moment, I considered lying. After all, Omegle doesn't provide any information to users unless you willingly give it. Regina was still the persona that I was taking on, but there was no way this random stranger would know that, unless... Now I did panic, and I considered disconnecting again. It had to be the same person. I've heard a bizarre coincidence where people occasionally bumped into each other again on the chat, but I thought it would never happen to me. I was paralyzed as to what to do, but then the stranger made the decision for me. "If this is the person who claimed to be Regina, you need to respond. It's a matter of life and death," they said. Then a pop-up came on my screen and told me they wanted to share their webcam feed with me. Something in that short text told me this was serious and more than just a creep taking things too far. Something was very wrong. I clicked on it and caught myself trying not to gasp in shock. The man was holding a woman hostage, tied on a stool with her eyes taped open and her mouth gagged. She looked tired and bruised, clearly having fought my stalker tooth and nail. And worst of all, they looked exactly like my fake profile, like the real Regina would look. My heart sank. The stalker held the knife closer to their jugular and made his demands. "It took me a while, but I found you. I don't know why you kept yourself hidden from me, but now we can be together once this imposter is out of the way," they said. I looked at the woman, frightened and frantic, and realized that could have easily been me, but they were convinced that I was Regina. I switched on my camera instinctively, panicking as I tried to explain. "You don't understand. This wasn't supposed to be real. It's just a scam. Regina wasn't supposed to be a real person. No one was supposed to get hurt," I told them. They looked confused, angry, as if what I said simply had to be a lie. "All we do is scam users online for credit card info, nothing else. Please, just let her go," I explained. I realized, even when I was saying it, that I wasn't being completely fair. We did hurt people. We were the cause of this woman's suffering. "If you don't want me, then what is the point of love?" the user said across my screen. Then, before I could bargain with him any further, he cut the woman's throat. I screamed as she bled out, choking on her own spit and blood, as he started to stab her over and over again. Then he turned to look me in the eye, his face full of rage and accusation. I knew this was my fault, but he wanted to make sure I saw his final act of hatred for what I represented as he cut his own throat next. He fell on top of Regina, the two victims gasping for breath on camera as I sat there motionless. I discovered the feed and called the authorities, but of course it was too late. I didn't even know where this stranger was located. "At least you didn't get hurt," my boss said, but the scars of what I saw on screen will haunt me forever.
I swear, it all started out innocently enough. My wife Carol and I had fallen on hard times due to the pandemic. She'd gotten laid off from her position and my hours had been cut due to our clients tightening up their purses the last couple of years. We had a toddler, Marcia, and a cat to feed, as well as ourselves. It was eating up our savings. We didn't want to be out of home. We were terrified. One night, while we were sitting at home, she had, at least I thought, jokingly talked about creating an Onlyfans. We toyed with the idea a bit, and eventually her face got more serious and she started talking numbers. I loved Carol, I trusted her, and honestly, we could use the money. We talked for a while longer about it, what our boundaries were on. We agreed that it wouldn't be anything outright lewd or erotic, and she suggested the idea of eating in front of a camera. Apparently it's a thing. Whatever, I guess. I agreed. It seemed harmless enough. It started out harmless. We set up a camera in our spare office facing the desk. Every other night, she would order takeout and eat in there while filming. She would post it wherever online. Things carried on normally like this for a couple of months. She'd order her own food, stuff herself in another room while we ate at the dining table. I'll admit the money was good. Good enough that it actually surpassed what she would have been making working a normal job. Carol bumped up to filming once a day. One day at lunch and the other day at dinner. Of course, she gained some weight, but hell, I'm no prime example of vigorous health. As the weeks went on, she spent more and more time filming these eating videos. We paid off the remainders on our auto loan. We put down a good chunk on our mortgage. We were able to start a college fund for Marcia. Our savings account was looking healthier than ever. Her health, however, wasn't looking too hot. She'd begun to lose breath quicker than usual. Eventually, she stopped coming on our family walks in the park. It wasn't a big deal. Just a couple of times a week, we would go to stretch our legs. After a while, she said she would prefer to stay home for the time being. At this point, I started to get a bit more concerned. No amount of money is worth throwing away your health, even if our insurance would cover whatever came up. I remember talking to her about it, that maybe she should slow down with her project and maybe even cut it off entirely. She was furious with me. She cried. She asked me if I still love her. Of course, I told her I do. I did. She was the love of my life. She'd given us our beautiful daughter. I caved in and just pleaded with her to be more careful. As a few more months passed, we saw her less and less. She'd moved a television into the office. She got a larger, more comfortable chair to sit in. She'd gained so much weight in half a year, I did not think it was possible, and I knew sure as hell that it wasn't healthy. She was having trouble standing without aid, and it seemed like she almost wouldn't fit through the door to the office, if she tried. I confronted Carol once more about it, and I swear I have never seen my wife get so furious. She was red in the face as she waved her hand around the house.
"Keep your goddamn nose out of my business. This entire house and you are being paid for by my work. If you don't support me here, then I will find someone who does."
Our daughter had peeked in and began crying. It was horrible to see her like that. I couldn't argue with her. She did support us at this point. I began to take her meals into her at her demand. She would take the food and glare at me until I left the room again. Any further attempts I made at making her see sense was met with threats of divorce, of taking the kids, of destroying my life. I guess I justified myself in being part of this. At least the rest of us were comfortable. Money was not an issue to us anymore, and that particular nightmare is not one I ever want to revisit. I used to think financial troubles were the worst kind of nightmare I'd ever face, and honestly, they're still up there. A year passed. Her mood got worse and worse, and Carol got more and more obsessed with her followers. I never thought that I would describe my wife as looking monstrous, but it almost seemed as if her limbs had begun to shrink. Her arms and legs looked like spindly, useless attachments to her mass. Her neck had fattened to the point that it looked like her head was attached directly to her massive torso. Her mouth seemed much wider than before, and she was almost always sweating. She began to scream at me for more food, always more. She would sob if she did not get it. I had to. I didn't want her to suffer. I never wanted her to suffer. Our cat disappeared 1 month ago. It happened on a night when I had taken Marcia out to the playground. Carol had texted me, "I am hungry. Bring me something now." I texted back that we were at the park. We wouldn't be back for another half hour or so. I am starving. We got back with a couple large pizzas for her. Our cat is a bit shy, so I didn't notice until much later in the day he was gone. God, I just assumed we left the window open or something. I swore I was crazy. Carol's limbs actually looked like they were getting shorter, retreating within her. She did not look like my wife. Maybe it was not my wife. The next week I was looking through our accounts for the first time in a while. Her deposits had stopped a month ago. She didn't listen to anything I say. I told her she needed to go see a doctor. She could not stand up. I began to cut back on how much food I would bring into her, but it didn't seem to halt her growth, which was noticeable on the daily now. All it did was enrage her. She would get red, her face contorted into a snarl, spittle flying from her wide mouth. She would point a shriveled, atrophied arm and scream curses. Her eyes, beady and full of fury, recessed into her massive head. Her hair began to fall out. I was so fucking terrified. I could not go in and feed her that last day. I could hear her screaming. Then she called for our daughter. Marcia went in. Marcia did not come out. I got worried. I opened the door. I saw Marcia's foot laying at the base of the monster that used to be my wife. She ate my daughter. Oh God. She ate my daughter. When I saw it, I couldn't move for what felt like hours, but I know it wasn't. The monster saw my look of terror. I don't know what happened. I saw the monster move for the first time since it consumed my wife. I don't know how many months ago. It heaved itself off its perch. It almost seemed to slither, drag itself over towards the door. It couldn't fit through the door frame. It pressed hard against it. Oh my God, I couldn't move. The door frame of the office began to creak horribly and bulge outwards before I came to. I ran. I got in the car. I drove. I'm out now. Oh my God, my daughter. What happened to my wife? What have I done?